title.
Do the project next. Do the project connect.
You want me to connect to something else?
The project connection is working really well.
Yeah, but then that's gonna log me out of Zoom completely and YouTube.
Get your mother fired up.
This is what I'm not starting all that.
All right, we'll start today's meeting. We had a difficulty starting the YouTube. Carol will not be joining us tonight. So I'd like to public comments for items on the agenda for discussion, not action. Quiet crowd. All right, moving on. Town report.
All right, so I did not type up a town administrator report, just in a transition thing that really required either pressing notice or more so we haven't had time to really collect any information to provide a full report. Treasurer's report, we are reconciled through August. Marjorie was here on Friday. We were having really awful difficulties with the Trio system. So it even stumbled her trying to figure it out, but it's all good, it's all reconciled. The one thing, if you look at the Matthias savings bank statement, which that is in the memo under the treasurer's report, you will see that the dredging account says that it's in the negative. We waited until this week to let the bank know to do the transfer from checking account into the reserve account, and it was like $560,000, and so we waited until we got a lot of money in for taxes to do that. Not thinking about that part, I let the bank know to do the $80,000 transfer when we got the bill in, because that had to go out. And so it just looks like it's negatives. In fact, it's not. That is something that you will see on next report. All of that money has been transferred. I also did try to put the budget in Trio and finalize it and transfer it in. And in doing so, somehow it posted a journal for almost $12 million. So needless to say, on Friday, we spent a lot of time trying to talk to Trio to get that resolved. As far as expense revenue, everything looks normal. You will see on the revenue part, once again, a Trio mistake. It says that we took in $3 million last month in revenue for taxes. We did not. So little tweaks like that are making it slightly inaccurate. But other than that, nothing really out of the ordinary. Excise tax is still coming in really high. It will be slowing down in the next couple of months with the seasonal getting a little slower. Building permits were taken in a lot, transfer station. But all in all, kind of regular standard expense and revenue. Any specific questions about that, Bob?
Relative to the revenue summary report, if we acknowledge that the tax net line 326 is inaccurate, that should say 0, or what should that say?
So what that shouldn't say 0, that should say we did receive in August revenue for taxes. So tax money has been coming in August and September. So I really don't know what that number is until Trio, and same thing, see where it says under year to date, but then percent. All of those and balance,
yeah.
all of those numbers are all slightly off because of whatever the issue with Trio.
So are all the other revenues and expenses accurate?
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
or they appear to be, they seem to be, and that one just seems like it was a little off.
So is that Trio look at why we don't have a budget number, why we don't have a percentage number?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because when I posted it, it was like 11 million, something, something. It took our entire budget and it tripled it. And so what we had to do is we had to have the company go into my computer, upload all that data to them so they can research, and they haven't had a chance to fix it before I had to print this out, so next time, hopefully.
Mark?
So all this stuff will be fixed soon, and then when we get ready to start budget season, I assume that you'll be able to give us, budget numbers with at least 1 or 2 years of history usage.
Yeah,
Great, thanks.
yeah, it's just this next week or so, this will be all off, but then, the next, treasurer's report, we should have all the accurate numbers.
You.
Any other questions about that? So there is the other reports, you have Public Works, Harbor Master, Code Enforcement, and Fire Department. Any specific questions about those?
Any questions?
Are you getting ready to, get done with the administrative report?
If there's no other questions, I'm done.
I have one question that's kind of not related to this report, but it's kind of an observation, if I may. Down at the parking lot in Chairman's Cove, there's been a green minivan. Are you aware of that vehicle?
I am aware of that, and that's something that I was gonna bring under communications,
Okay.
next. It's, to this point, abandoned vehicle. We have 3 different phone numbers that we tried calling, and I've gotten the information from the state as far as what actions we can take.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Any other questions? On any other reports? All right, moving on to regular business, unless you have something.
No.
Okay. Regular business, 22-090, to discuss the current harbor master job description and take any necessary action.
Actually, I have to say,
Yes.
one question about, the code officer report.
What report?
Code officer, there is a suggestion in there that we've talked about several times, which is to raise the fee for road permit.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of action plan on that? Is that just something that we're talking about on that slide, or?
His recommendation was to raise it from 100 to 1,000. That's something that, I'll brief you about in the next meeting.
Okay, and my understanding is it's currently within the growth ordinance, which means we can't just change it without changing the ordinance, is that correct?
It would have to go through a town vote.
Right, and maybe change it to other fee like we did everything else or something like that.
Yeah, either other specific fee or specific or right in there, as defined under fines and fees.
Yep.
So then you don't have to change the ordinance every time you make a fee adjustment.
Didn't we request to send that to the planning board?
Not that particular one, that was just that one little, it was literally just that sentence.
All right. Okay. Yeah, cool. All right, moving on to the harbor master job description. So this came up last budget season. Last budget season, and Jen brought this up about the amount of expense that we're spending on the harbor master position, Southbridge, whatever it is. And then the voting and the discussion that we had, and outdoor, whatever it was all. So question was asked. She did some research about other communities around here that have harbor master positions and are paying considerably less, either a stipend, or something in that fashion. So.
That the revenue.
You got it? Yep. Okay. Yep. All right. So. I didn't know where to go with this. Who wants to start with this guy? Look at it. It's updated. Description and stuff in there. So it took a little bit to read through and see exactly what our masters do.
What all these other towns are paying. We know what we're paying, and we know what we receive in revenue from associated accounts, specifically moorings and licenses for clam licenses and things like that. We don't know what these other towns are collecting for those kinds of things. Yes?
I can add slightly to that. I reached out, so I didn't have much time to reach out to any of these other places, but I did reach out to one I seen as they're the closest community to us and relatively similar. I talked to Amy out there, and their harbor master, where are my notes? I asked, do you currently have a harbor master, and do they run revenue? And her answer was kind of, sort of, no. We have a deputy harbor master that was promoted to harbor master, then demoted. Technically, the harbor master is supposed to be in charge of moorings, but it comes to my desk. We charge $30 for residents and $60 for non. Harbor master is supposed to keep that in order and follow up, and hasn't done so in years. Moorings generate between 3,500 and 4,000 annually, but could probably double if it was enforced with follow-up from the harbor master. They're also responsible for issuing tickets at the float if they exceed the time, but that also hasn't been done in years. So I think you should, it appears based on that, if you cut back, you should expect some of our revenue to decline too, because I don't know who would keep track of that.
Yeah.
I kind of don't think it's relevant how much a town brings in from lines. I feel like we're talking about two separate things, because we don't pay, somebody at the transfer station based on how much revenue they're bringing in. It's a set job, and that's it. It's whether or not the job for the town is worth a certain amount of money. And, in looking at all of this, it just it doesn't make sense to me where we are with this position. And it's not a personal thing, it's totally looking at the big picture. So.
There's no one here from Shellfish, who's currently on Shellfish Committee. Okay. And the only reason for me to ask that question tonight is, could I address Gennaro directly? Gennaro, in your opinion, I mean, there aren't many claims, right?
No,
And the mussel dried up. And so is oysters and aquaculture basically mostly the shellfish activity?
yeah, I don't have, I'm not part of that with shellfish. But there's clams for, people that do dig, there's enough for them to eat.
Yeah,
I don't think it's being overdug or anything.
yeah. So we are selling some licenses.
Yeah.
And there's some activity in that area. But not what there was 15 years ago, probably.
No.
Yeah.
That was years ago. So, and it's hard to get down to Indian Point now, so we don't want
Right.
to walk down there and dig and then walk all the way back up.
And is it safe to say, obviously, we haven't had a boat in the last 2-3 years due to engine, lack of engine. So is it safe to say that mainly your activities have been focused on stonewall and channels on the ship?
Yeah.
And we don't really enforce anything over at our float over at Cousin, because we've never attempted to. We've never attached any rules, regulations, or ordinances to that float at Cousin. We've just sort of let it be what it is, and sometimes it works. And
But is that our float to enforce?
To be honest.
yeah. We own the float in the ramp at Cousin.
So we're tied up on that float, it's ultimately we're responsible.
I think that's a question to be investigated.
Well, we could, yeah, I mean, what I've
Everybody
heard,
can tie.
you guys will be meeting with Yarman, so you could ask them the question. What I've heard from Nat Tupper and the harbor master, whatever his name is, Will something, is that's your float, this is our float. And I said, so we can attach ordinances to a float in your waters? And they said, we don't care what you do. I said, well, that's obvious because some of your people are tying up at our float and they're supposed to be tied up at your float if you're supplying mooring to them and it's not helping our situation. So my only point is, you haven't really been able to, obviously you don't have a boat to zip over that much with it, but we haven't really been able to do anything with that float over there, right?
Yeah.
We haven't really attempted to. We haven't given you.
Just on the topic of Cousins, so in 2018, Coastal Waters looked into that and made recommendations to the BOS to change that essentially. So per the interlocal agreement, the town of Shebag Island shall manage and control the use of the ramp and float on the northerly side of the Cousins. So we asked to change the length restriction and then the time basically not be used as a permanent berth.
And to add it into the ordinance?
No, rules and regs. Ordinance will go to town, have to go to town meeting, but we have the power to change the rules and regs.
Oh, I
Well,
see.
you do, the board.
And,
But we have no way, like, without a vote to get there, but we did suggest that, and I'm not sure where it went,
okay,
but it might be worth looking into.
when was that?
2018, 4 years.
I think you got 18 in front of you guys, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't.
Well, I'm
know where
sorry
it went.
if I was part of not acting on that.
No, I think it was discussed, but I,
Okay.
when I asked Aaron Rose, he's part of it, then.
Yeah.
And he said, I know.
Well, I won't waste much more time. I'm sorry if I'm dragging this up. My only point is, and Gennaro will attest to the fact that I kind of watch how things are going and make unhelpful suggestions once in a while. But I think there is some value, at least, in having some sort of presence some time of the year, especially at Stonewall. Chandler is a lot easier, a little easier, probably. Stonewall is the hub. Stonewall where it's at. hasn't gotten any better, and we haven't tried to make it any better. I see some value to at least some time throughout the year. I agree, we're probably overfunding the position at this point, and I also see some things in the job description that probably need to be looked at. And I won't waste a lot of time on that either. On the third page, desirable skills. First aid CPR would be easy enough to have somebody be up to date with. Captain's
I have a
license.
CPR.
Captain's license is a question mark. Law enforcement experience is a big question mark. And successful completion of the main criminal justice 100-hour course is probably not required. And the only reason that got in there, I believe, is at one point, I think this town was looking at that. And that was just not ever realized. And that would come from towns like Freeport, Cumberland, Falmouth, Portland, that have real police departments back up. So just pointing that out. Thank you.
Two things. One, just as a vignette, when Cassidy got thrown out of the ends dinghy. Y'all remember that? The steering wheel on the ends dinghy? He got thrown out of the water and the dinghy was running wild down East End 6-7 years ago.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was on the beach down in Julian House that day, or on the job site, so it's more like 10 years ago, I guess. And we watched the whole thing happen. Didn't see Cassidy getting rescued, but we saw the boat spinning. And then 3 different harbor masters showed up. One of those may have been the county, I'm not sure. But several boats showed up. And then the Coast Guard showed up. And then one of the other towns' harbor master boats cowboyed up, ran under the bow of this runaway dinghy with a 40-horse engine on it, and reached up and grabbed the key. Stupid thing to do. My point is, there's a lot of harbor master boats around there. But just something to keep in mind. When we had an emergency, similar fashion when we had the emergency over here at Buck Farms, when they had that fire, there was a lot of response here quick when we need help for that kind of emergency. The second thing that comes to mind to me with all this conversation is that, correct me if I'm wrong, before we seceded, we did not have a harbor master specifically on Cheviot. There was a Cumberland harbor master, but we didn't have one. Is that correct? So when we seceded, in effect, we created an additional harbor master slot on this part of Casco Bay. Because we just assumed we needed to have a harbor master.
We have to have a harbor master.
Can you explain that?
State, it's a state requirement that water towns have to have one. I have it in here somewhere.
So have to have a harbor master. Does
We
it
have to
define-
have one.
Does it define anything about what they do? Okay, so while she's looking for that, I would just make the point that, like a lot of things when we seceded, we had a lot of work to do. And we just sort of cut and pasted with what Cumberland had. That's how we did our land use ordinances, that's how we did a lot of the other ordinances. And I don't think we've ever really sat down and studied what the community's issues are relative to the things that are in this job description, or even a better approach might be, what are the issues relative to the waterfront, both the land side of the waterfront and the water side of the waterfront, that need addressing, that the community needs to have addressed. So after all that word salad, I would suggest we take a look at that from a blank sheet of paper standpoint and determine what is it that the community needs, and then how do we best provide it within the constraints of whatever the state requires.
Want me to read it?
Sure.
So, Title 38, Waters and Application, Chapter 1, Operation of Vessels. The municipal officers of town that border or contain territorial water on request by any person desired more privileges or regulation of mooring privileges for boats or vessels shall appoint a harbor master for a term of not less than 1 year, who is subject to all the duties and liabilities of that office as prescribed by the state law, municipal ordinances and regulations adopted by municipal officers, municipal harbor commissioners, and, you know, it lists port authorities, such so forth. Municipal officer may establish the harbor master compensation and for a cause by them declared in writing after due notice to the office and hearing. So it is, I mean, there's, I can look up the law as far as what the requirements are, but as a town, we are supposed to have.
So let me finish. We decided some number of years ago to combine shellfish and harbor master. And I know we're not required to have a shellfish warden. If we're going to have some things in terms of licensing and such, we do. Especially if we have a commercial resource, which we don't need. We're still selling a few commercial, like 3 this year, right, commercial license?
Three or four, yeah.
Yeah, but in your knowledge, is anybody really selling it?
Just a handful of here and there.
I talked to Gary a couple months ago, he said he tried it once and it was too much trouble.
We do sell, so we've sold more than 3 this year, because we sell a lot of recreational.
Commercial license.
Commercial, yeah.
But even with recreational, you still have to have shellfish.
You still have to have a shellfish warden if you're going to sell those licenses. Yes. My point is, given that we don't have a lot of clams, do we really need those licenses? If you talk to the state, if you don't have a shellfish warden, if you don't have a licensing program, then the state licensing requirements kick in. So people can still dig, but they're subject to the state laws instead of our town laws. And my larger point is, if we look at the current issues we have on our waterfront, it's, for example, parking of boats incorrectly, and it's parking of cars incorrectly. And that's just a real, just real cursory summation of what's going on, but I think the management of the moorings pales in comparison to the problems we have with parking of boats and parking of cars. So what I'm suggesting is that we spend some time looking at what the community really needs on the waterfront, and then come up with some recommendations.
Any other thoughts? For the past couple of years, especially in the summertime, we've been requiring or asking the harbor master to make an appearance more frequent at the Stone Pier, more frequent at Chandler's. We've also requested him to go to Cousins, but that, you know, obviously without a boat, makes it a little difficult. But we've requested more and more of the harbor master. So if we reduce the hours and reduce the pay for the harbor master, I'm afraid we're gonna reduce our coverage that we're requesting to do for the past few years. And then who's that gonna fall on? As far as the boat situation, are these other towns required to help us? Is that, you know, I know the Coast Guard is, or the sheriff is.
Marine.
The Marine Patrol is, but the other towns required to, and are we? I mean, I hate to ask like Long to help us out because we don't have a boat. And it's not, you know, without some kind of compensation or something like that. I don't know how that would work, but that's.
Can I ask one question? So separate from the harbor master, shellfish position, with fire and rescue, we have a mutual aid agreement with Long Island in our rescue transportation falls through when you're done. We certainly probably wouldn't ask Long Island for any help with mooring, because it sounds like they're doing a great job over there with it. Again, could I ask a question to Gennaro? Gennaro, you know that guy in Yarmouth, Will, whatever his name is? Has there ever been any conversations, in your opinion, between you guys or him and his police chief? I assume he answers to the police
Yes.
chief, about whether they would be available to help us once more with their boat?
I'm sure I called him, he'd be here in a second, but I think they're an answer now too.
But no formal
No,
discussions
no.
about it. Thank you.
he works Thursdays through Sunday, that's it.
So it's just my thoughts about that that we've been extremely busy, especially since, COVID's kind of lifted and stuff. Everybody came, and it just really busy down there. And we've requested for the past 2 years now that I've noticed that we've requested the harbor master to make more of an appearance there, especially with the tie-up. Unloading and loading, to monitor that more. Stuff like that. Yeah,
Those requests are for the summer. We're not talking about winter months or anything. I think that's why it's important to make this a stipend position with a much smaller window when, assistance is needed, like all the other towns. I mean, a lot of them don't do anything until July 1st, until Labor Day, and that's when there's people out on the water. So I think that it's going to require more looking into maybe coastal waters to look at, what they think is a more reasonable plan going forward and go from there.
Yeah, I don't know what duties have been done in the off-season, I'll call it, from October through April.
Just mooring stuff and shellfish renewal stuff.
Yeah.
That's what next month I started, I had 8 hours till the week after that, month after that. It's 8 hours until March, I believe, or April.
Right.
Yeah, gradually, in October, the requirement is 24 hours a week, then it drops to 16 hours a week in November, and then December through March, the expectation is 12 hours a week, or no more than 12 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I don't ever work over my hours.
So
Never have.
So I agree with especially Jen's last part of her statement. I would like to see something sent back to us from coastal waters and shellfish with something recommending, what they think they would like to see, at least for partial hours of performance in their area. I think mostly this job has morphed into, some peer patrolman, quite frankly.
Yeah, I get a lot of complaints, I get a lot of phone calls.
Yeah,
There's postman tied up here.
yeah,
If I'm not there, I head right down. We get the inn, constantly battling with the inn every day. So it's not.
right.
And frankly, I gotta say, when somebody calls and complains to me that the lobsterman has his gear on the dock, I don't know who you're gonna find that's gonna approach a lobsterman and tell him he needs to get his gear on the dock. Because, it's not,
Yeah,
they don't take to it kindly,
no, I understand.
so.
And you and the sheriff did move some boats off
Yeah.
of the tie-up, so I saw you a couple times, which was appreciated from my point of view, at least. I'm one of the people that pay the tie-up fee down there and tries to keep a boat from getting beat up, and I appreciate that the enforcement is there to make sure people are paying and behaving themselves as well as they can. we have a limited resource and limited amount of room down there. And maybe Coastal Waters has asked us to add on down there, but I think only one time way back. Maybe before you done facility, so. I think there's more discussion to be had, and, the committee certainly should have input, and I think probably restructuring of this job with some thought is probably warranted.
Okay.
Gennaro, I think in the job description it says that you need to keep a log.
Mhm.
Is that something that we could see as far as?
Yeah, I have to be truthful, since February, I have them all my years past, but since February, at that point, I was beginning to feel that I don't have any support from anybody at the town. So I had kept one since February. So,
Could we see the one from before?
yeah, I'll take them out.
Martin?
And maybe this is not an appropriate subject for the joint standing team. I think it's usually, when you go to speak with the Army, but maybe a casual question. I believe you would be at that meeting, and possibly Matt, about whether it would be appropriate or possible to speak with the Army Harbor Master about some assistance with their boat. That harbor master guy seems like a pretty decent individual. I don't know if it's hard enough, I don't know.
But isn't that, they're part of the police department?
Yeah, I think so.
I was just gonna say, he monitors the Yarmouth flow.
Oh, yeah.
Actively.
Yeah.
And the mooring field over there, and the boats that are tied up on the Yarmouth float that have Yarmouth mooring registration numbers on them. But to your comment, I don't think he looks at all at the straight folks, that was up past.
Thank you.
Nora, what are your thoughts if the board and or coastal water recommends to reduce your time from July to Labor Day?
You mean during the busy time? I thought it was for
During the busy time, and then during the winter, there wouldn't be.
I don't know if I have a choice, do I?
No, I'm asking, would you?
I think that you're gonna get a lot more complaints from people with no one, so I'm on a stipend, do I answer the phone every time it rings? Do I go down there and spend 6 or 7 hours down there, going back and forth all day? That's the question. Or do I just work when I'm called?
So I just out the specifics.
I get that, yeah, and no, that's something I have to accept.
We would require you to, and I don't want to speak for the whole board, but basically monitor the mooring field, monitor the boat tie-ups, pretty much what you're doing right now down there, but only during the busy season.
Yeah.
Basically, I'd say July, but I don't know
July 1st.
or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I originally took this job because I needed an extra job, and I've gone on, I'm starting commercial fishing again, so, but my summers are pretty much free. I bogey during the week, but the weekends are free usually, so.
I think this, I think the town needs to look at first and foremost, like starting with the job description. This job description was crazy when I read it. What we expect for a town with a year-round population of under 400 out of our harbor master, if we're going along with that job description, is nuts. That's like somebody that's associated with the police department. So I think starting for the town to start with the job description and figure out what we really need as a town is definitely the place to start. And then seeing it from, maybe how that works for an employee, I think that's the second part of the conversation, so.
Well, Justin, do you think coastal water would be willing to look at the job description and come up with a not a solution, but an idea of
Sure.
of what they thought the job description should look like? Going from this to this in long and then this in minor paving. Kind of like there's gotta be a middle ground somewhere.
The one in the coastal waters ordinance is much condensed.
Look at.
Yeah, I don't want to take up any more time really, but just with what that job description is looking at, from what I've seen in my past years as being a fair captain, and what goes on the stone work, like that could be 15-hour-a-day job in the summertime, Memorial Day, on weekends, and then, once you get when school's out until right through Labor Day, and then again on weekends through Columbus Day, like that. Stonework is crazy, and trying to keep people doing what they're supposed to do down there, trying to keep things from not being, people tying up on the commercial float, and people tying up on the float that the ferry uses. That is a big job, and it's not a fun job. I don't envy anybody that's got it. But yeah, I do think it's a job.
And just to ask you, Gennaro, do you think the town would benefit from getting a deputy? Or
Somebody in the summertime, so there could be somebody down there all the time. Because I'll leave for 10 minutes and then I'll come back and there'll be a boat in the time spot. And I don't have any places, I have nowhere to sit down there. Bake in the sun a lot of the day. Sit in the truck. And walk back and forth all day, but yeah, and we've asked for a shack and they want to give us a shack, which is fine. Maybe a picnic table down there with an umbrella on it would be nice. So.
Well, I have to consider that one for you.
I had a chair down there and I got to go over. It's a chair I got to pick up. I get it.
All right, so, where does the board want to go with this? Do we go with what Mark suggested, to push this over to coastal waters, come up with a suggestion with a new job description that would better fit our town? And shellfish board also. Just Mark?
I'd like to hear from coastal waters as far as what the job description looks like, what they think it ought to look like. If it's just a condensed version, then I can't remember that one, excuse me, it's been so long, I think Hamilton and I probably argued about it for hours, but it's been 15 years now. And shellfish too, I'd also like to suggest that possibly those committees could take a first shot at how many hours or how much time that they think, even money per hour. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't hurt to give us a recommendation. All we can do is cut it in half, send it to, I guess it's not, this is gonna have to go to the voters.
So the coastal waters and shellfish can make the recommendation about the job description adjustment. The board ultimately decides on the job description, so it will come back to the selectmen. The selectmen will adopt a new modified version of it. And then based off of that, you can, move on to determine what you would recommend monetary wise for the budget to accommodate the job description.
If it doesn't change the board.
Budgetarily though, obviously, if we part with the voter.
Yes, that part.
Yeah, I would refrain from asking the coastal waters and shellfish to write a job description, but rather if they could take the current one and mark it up.
Yeah.
This is good,
That's
this
all
one
I
is
know.
stronger, this could be less, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
This job description is one that Gennaro initialed, and this was the expectation when he was hired, so.
Shoveling roads and all that stuff. I do that.
Well, thank you.
Is that going to be full time to those two maybe?
Yeah. Well, Justin's here, so thank you. And then, I don't know, where the shellfish.
I'll send an email again.
All right. Any other comments? All right, thank you all for your time. Moving on to 22-091 to discuss law enforcement coverage on the Big Island and take any necessary action. Thank you. All right, who wants to start this one?
Provide some information of what I collected briefly.
Yes.
So I reached out to Bob Malin. I reached out to Long Island. And I reached out to the sheriff's department. Long Island has had issues filling a sheriff the last couple of years since the one that they had has retired. So they've been getting sporadic coverage all summer, where they've had different people alternating week at a time coming at it. So whoever Cumberland can get to go out there will go out there, spend a week, and then they'll find somebody else and so forth. It's worked out for them to the best that it can, but it's not ideal. They would like to have something a little bit more permanent throughout the season. So we've been lucky in that sense. Cumberland County reaching out to them, they anticipated that if we wanted to extend our coverage through Columbus Day, that it would cost approximately $55,000, so that would increase the budget by a lot. But they currently don't have the staffing, so they are currently a number of deputies short. And if they hire deputies, those will go towards the town coverage where they have people working for time. So even if we make that request, we're not gonna have that be granted. If we're talking to Bob, he had a very similar, I mean, the one option is, you know, see if he could stay and then the town budget more. But the suggestion that they had, and once again, Cumberland County had, was that if the town is experiencing an influx in population and issues that Matt had shared, that the wisest thing at this point would be to pass those expenses on to the consumers. So during the summertime, potentially have times where you can, you know, ask for extra coverage, but similar to what I briefly mentioned last time, have it be something within one of our ordinances where if there is an expected event of over a certain amount of people, if there's a BYOB, if there's any kind of liquor license, then those parties are expected to hire their own coverage. So if you have the hotel having a wedding every single weekend there, and they're having a gathering, the hotel wedding party is expected to have coverage. So that's $73 an hour for a minimum of 4 hours, or however long that event is gonna go, would be put onto that consumer. So then that way there's the coverage for those private large events that could then trickle down to the boat or any issues around the community. But then that's also not taken away from the sheriff, who is here trying to control the whole community. And that was something that Bob also reiterated, that Matt had said that this summer in particular, he really saw something that he hadn't seen in the past, which was there was a lot of drunk, negative events taking place, and he would have preferred the ability to ask for additional coverage because there were moments where he felt like he could have escalated very quickly, but to do so, like Matt said, pause this, let me go get the sheriff, then we'll come back, then we'll deal. And so kind of, there's a variety of different things that could be done, but the easiest solution to it might be to pass that expense onto the consumer and expect that out of them and try to figure that out.
Bit of a contradiction there, because if we're gonna tell the hotel they have to hire a sheriff deputy, but the sheriff doesn't have an extra deputy, that's gonna be a problem. We could try to make arrangements with private security firms, that's gonna be all over the roadmap in terms of the results that we get, so. But I agree with what sounds like everybody was saying, which is, for big events that involve alcohol, we need to have a requirement that coverage is provided, not by the town, but by the.
Well, and necessarily it wouldn't be by the, I'm just using hotel as an example, not, not necessarily the hotel, but if you have, I mean, I had a wedding with 200 people, an event like that, BYOB, large crowd, and that's something, when people come in to do a marriage license, that could be simply shared with them FYI, or.
I said holders, not
So,
hotel.
yeah.
The holder would be it.
Yeah.
And it can't be, well, just hire my dad to do it. It's gotta be somebody with some sort of qualification for having meaningful result. But it is, I think, getting way out of hand, and it's gonna get worse before it gets better if we do something.
So it would be a policy that would have to write up.
I don't know if it's a policy or if it's an ordinance. If it's tied to the victualler's license, liquor license thing.
Well, is that a state, like, that's a state license, right?
Special amusement and victualers is found,
Oh, that
yeah.
one.
So what if you required a permit for a large event? Event of 150 people or more. And anytime, as part of that permit, they would have to cover the cost. And I do think that the best way would be through the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department. I think that finding a deputy to come out for a week is different than having a deputy come out for an evening. And so maybe that's a little bit easier.
Yeah, he said if they're planned events that they can work around.
Okay.
But once again, that would be an issue on the consumer, not the town.
And if they have it covered, if they don't have the personnel to do it, plan all you want.
But you said they would, they could do that. I mean, my dad
That was,
top.
so that was the sheriff, Cumberland County Sheriff Department, the one who deals with all the contracts. That was his recommendation. Is that this is,
Yeah, so my thought with the permit, I don't want things to be more complicated than they have to be in this town. But I do feel like something's gotta be done. We're not like Long Island. We have this big hotel that attracts all, this whole other element out here, and it's every single weekend from Memorial Day right through Columbus Day. There's a wedding coming up this weekend that, CTC has nothing to do with. We're not doing any of the transportation for it. But there's gonna be almost 200 people there. In various states, who knows? Sometimes it's a happy drunk group that they're singing like Disney songs on the stonework, and sometimes it's like a raging frat party. And right now, we just are not covered.
So what would be the purpose of the permit? Just to let us know?
Let us know, but then as part of a requirement to that permit, you could say that, you're expected to cover the cost of a deputy on special assignment out here for the duration of the permitted event. So if it was gonna be a 4-hour wedding or a 4-hour party or whatever, the town would have that set cost, and that would be either, they had to show that they had paid that, or I think even better, the town would just collect the money and with the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department, arrange for a special assignment by that deputy.
I think if we did something like that, make it a requirement for a permit, it have to be more. Jen?
This summer, the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department came out and they did their coffee with a copper, weapons with mailman, is what they call it. But I spoke to all four of them, and they, like, it seems like everything, where did the people go? But they're shorthanded, and, I'm sorry, but, you know, you can say it's required for a party of 150 or more, but you can get a group of 50 people that can be nasty. I mean, you don't know, and that's a really hard thing to gauge. Not saying that it doesn't need to be, but, I'm not sure that the way they were talking, I'm not sure that they are gonna have the coverage to come out. I mean, did they do that in events in the mainland? I mean, how does that happen? If there's, you know, a situation on the mainland at a wedding or an event and all hell breaks loose and they need assistance, what happens? You call the police come in. I would think that if it got out of hand on this island, that mailman gets called and he calls for backup. Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, but if mailman's not here. That's where the question is too. But if that gentleman's here, doing a wedding and he calls for backup, you know, he's here already. So mailman going down there to help him is great. So
Is it?
I don't know what the right solution is.
Right, is
But
there
that's where we're,
private, you know, security?
That's what it ends up being, is basically, it's to cover a private event, and that was something that, you know, if it's for a specific event, then it has to be that $72, minimum 4 hours, so it's worth their while. And that's something, that, you know, he, mentioned in terms of, you know, if, he said, if Bob, if you know there are weddings happening, where is it? Hold on. So if during the summertime, deputy mailman could potentially request assistance ahead of time, and if we have the staff on duty, if we can hire a deputy to be out there. The other way that it could be handled is the town creates an ordinance that requires a deputy, not mailman, to be hired by the wedding party. So it goes back and forth too. It would, and that's what it would be, you know, with any large events, they would be required to have this be part of the cost. But that coverage would be.
And it seems
so
to me
it's
that,
if.
you know, not to single them out, but the large events, it's at the end, right? Are there any other large events that we're having problems with?
So, yeah, I mean, without, you know, I want to put it all on one entity necessarily, but yeah, for all practical intents and purposes, you're exactly right. And when I had various conversations with the general manager of the hotel this summer, and management of the hotel, staff of the hotel definitely recognizes that there's a problem. I mean, there's times that they don't feel safe. And when I asked her about, you know, would the hotel be willing to hire, you know, private security, she was, without speaking for her, she didn't seem unsupportive of that. Ownership seemed dead against it. And so without having, and I don't know why. I mean, it's peanuts in the grand scheme of things for the cost of the weddings that they're putting on there. It's such a small cost. I think they got a quote for Allied Security to come out and do an event of $600 for a couple guys to be out here for the event. And they weren't gonna do it. They didn't do it. So unless the town somehow makes them do it, it's not gonna happen, and we're gonna be left exposed as a community.
But where would we be if we contacted that entity and said, this is what we're looking at because of these reasons, you know? And start off with let's try to be nice about this before we slam an ordinance that's gonna, you know, require you to do this.
But
I agree with that. I think an initial conversation with Vika and one or two select person can help. I would be glad to participate. I'm not sure we'll get too far with them, but it doesn't hurt to make an attempt, to talk to them about what we're hearing for concerns from the stormwater area, the company and the community. I haven't heard this from Matt and CTC. I've heard it from other people. I've witnessed some of it. Maybe I've part of one of it. I don't know. It doesn't hurt to ask them to have a conversation, see where the conversation goes. If it doesn't go very far, then we have to come back and talk about it again. I've been thinking about, we've been sitting here, that it's going to be possibly difficult to enforce another ordinance, without really putting more onerous on our town office staff and our town administrator possibly. I didn't know that. And what would happen if our summer contract officer, right now, Bob Millman, was on duty and they had an event, we wouldn't need another? If we had this ordinance in effect, this is a hypothetical question, in our opinion.
the ordinance is to, my thought would be, if they still have an event while mailman's here, they have to supply the security for that event. Mailman still covering the rest of the town. And if that gentleman needs help, then mailman will step in and help.
Yeah. Those two gentlemen. And I also know, Kevin Joyce and his officer quite well from the years of town. We used to meet with them, or try to meet with them once a year, talk about how things were going from each direction. Lately, they'll basically say just what Jen said, you can come talk to us if you'd like, but we don't know.
Well, that's who provided this information.
Yeah. So I think asking the end to talk probably doesn't hurt, end up being a waste of time, I don't know that. And then based on that conversation, I think probably we think about if we want to revisit this in this forum again, or whether we want to have any more of a formal conversation with Kevin Joyce and or his officers, but they're not going to tell us they suddenly hired 20 more people.
What about the slow belt? But there's a slight difference between, we can't find enough officers to staff long on a weekly basis versus if you're working a 40-hour shift as a deputy for $40 an hour, and all of a sudden you can make time and a half by working at a wedding on an island. I think it would at least make sense to go to that well and see how many times we get water, how many times we don't get anybody to come out. But there's a way to make it work, and we've got to do something. This is not going to get that. The difference between Vika's wedding or my son's wedding or my daughter's wedding and the island wedding, to a large degree, is the people who were at your wedding have an investment in this community. A lot of the folks that are at most of these, and all of the folks that are at most of these hotel weddings, it's just a place. It's not something they have an attachment to. They're never going to see the people that they're attending again. And that's a difference. And it's a business. It's got to be run like a business, and it's got to be policed like a business. They can't. I don't want to just say, well, it's too hard, let's not try it. We've got to, I think trying the conversation first with ownership is the right way to go, and to say, any event that has 75 people or more, you've got to provide security. You can do it voluntarily, or if you don't, then we're gonna have to talk about an ordinance and go from there.
Mark?
So dragging this out, just try to remember, if we make an ordinance, whether it's land use, parking, or large event ordinance, it applies to everyone. You can't have a ordinance that's targeted.
You could have an ordinance that was targeted at commercial areas. I'm not suggesting we do that, but
Yeah, I'm just saying we may want an opinion on it. I know that would be structured.
I think let's start with the talks first and see, and let them know it's an issue and you want them to try to, help us out and get some enforcement there for at least the big gatherings. And if, and just let them know if we don't get a resolve, then we gotta go a different route.
I would like to make a suggestion if I could.
Yes.
I'd like to suggest to the queue myself and take that.
So Caitlin, the general manager at the inn, is aware of the option Vika made me aware of, which is that 4-hour minimum deputy comes over a special event coverage and whatever. So I think that it would be important that she hears that again, and that if ownership, hopefully ownership of the hotel will be part of this conversation.
Well, it would be the ownership, the general manager.
I hope she's there too.
Ownership, yeah, obviously make her aware, but it would be through the homestead ownership. All right. All right, 22-092. Thank you, Matt. To authorize the town administrator to sign up for a new credit card with the Tri Savings Bank. I have a motion.
we to authorize the town administrator to sign up for a new credit card with the tax citizen.
Second by Ned. All right, any questions? Just for a new card requiring you to get.
Not necessarily requiring, the bank has recently, I met with the bank a couple weeks ago, and, they have a new vendor that they're using for credit card, and it's better security, and you can monitor, increase and decrease the limit, so, security wise, it just seems like a wise choice to switch from the current one. The current one is terrible, we had an issue with dealing with them over the years, so I think it's just a better direction.
All right, any questions, comments? All right, all in favor? All right, moving on to communications. So,
The communication that I had in the packet was from Lionel, it was from, Coley, and it was just after we, Mark and I had met with him. I asked him to, just to, put his thoughts in a letter form, and, he did, just kind of reiterated really a lot of what, we already have heard and know about, the Bennett's Cove, but in particular, his suggestion about a temporary solution that he can help us out with, that could potentially help, in the process while we figure out whatever the long-term solution is going to be to try to get some of these bigger trucks in and out of Bennett's to help reduce on the noise and the cluttering down there.
Jen?
I thought it was a very well-written letter. And I don't know if it's something, I assume it's something that we would have to put on another agenda to act upon. But I think we should do that because I think it makes sense. It's getting worse down there as far as getting trucks stuck, and the seasons are changing, and it seems to me that if That's a pretty minimal amount of money to spend to have, something that's gonna help. And it's not just, it's the whole community that's gonna help.
Couple of things. One, just thinking ahead to how some community members are going to respond, I would suggest we look for quotes on the same thing, just so we can say we're not just lining coding files. So I don't know who sells those kind of things. Jen's husband.
We wouldn't be buying
I understand. I'm just saying,
in general.
we should look for alternatives that are of a similar nature. That's one suggestion. Second suggestion would be that we talk to an engineer first to make sure that this passes the smell test from an engineer who does that kind of work as a temporary solution. And thirdly, just to make sure that we get it from the property.
Yeah, then we get the permit.
I don't know what engineer we would talk to. Again, Paul, probably knows. Scott probably knows. But, and there may not be anybody who makes those things, but we should at least ask.
So that, yeah, so like Deacon just said, that would cost money also. Where
Would we get that same kind of information out of DEP? Saying that it was,
A valid solution?
Yeah.
So when we talked to Coley, he said that these planks is, what they do is when they're going into places as temporary barge structure, if they're gonna be in places for a temporary amount of time, loading and unloading, they put these in and they kind of, so there's no digging out dirt or removing things. It sounds like he just, I think he said 6 or 8 or something like that, he would just place, so that it kind of helps them.
And I absolutely trust Coley's judgment. I'm just saying, if we just do this based on Coley's say-so, we're setting ourselves up for heartache with the vote country.
oh, I think we're setting ourselves up for how, whatever.
That's true, but let's try to,
But
I'm just
something
gonna,
happened.
yeah, I agree. I love the idea.
So let's get some information, and then possibly get the budget to see where we can take the money out of. You know, because he's asking for 45, and if they're gonna go the engineering route, and need that, so where we're getting that money.
Maybe we start with the DEP, see if they have an opinion on it. If they say it's absolutely the right thing to do to protect the beach, maybe that's all we need. And say that.
There's typically you have to have like a design or it's a drawing or something like that. And then it's not neat. So, sometimes they don't require to have a full engineer. Yeah.
Our code enforcement officer,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'd have the code officer call DP, just throw that.
I'll share this communication with him and, have him contact DEP and then, just CC me on the communications to them.
All right, and then we'll put this on the next agenda, to look at further. Jen?
Just so you know, we have 10,000 and some change in barge ramps line item. And then there's, and almost 11,000 in coastal access.
So we have 10,000 in there, did we just allocate $5,000 for surveying?
We did, but-
Coastal access.
Oh, that was a coastal access, okay, sorry, wrong one.
And coastal access, there was money that, was put in from, town meeting too, so.
10,000 in that.
All right, Mark.
Couple quick questions. This won't go over well, as we know, likely with the neighborhood. So, to be prepared, along with the good suggestions that you've already had, I would suggest that we try to find out from Coley the length of these, if he's setting them lengthwise.
Did 12 feet wide.
Well, I think a more detailed
Yeah.
information,
Yeah,
I figured this would be a good start and then whatever.
because I've already had one fisherman corner me who is convinced that I've been sawing a new ramp down there next week. And And his question was valid. If you guys ever put a, and Coley talked about this with us, if we ever do recommend a ramp down there, temporary or permanent, is there going to be enough room to sneak through and grab my traps? That might be a good question to be ready to answer. And then the other one is,
Sorry, meaning to drive down on the beach.
well,
or
I know they're not supposed to drive on the beach, but they are.
Is that what you mean by?
Yeah, sneak to the left
I was
over
gonna say,
there.
'cause would that help fishermen unloading and loading?
Well, I thought it would, but this person was less than friendly to me about the possibility of putting concrete down there, and I understand why. So we might just want to be prepared for some. The other question that Jim Butler was gonna help answer, if they even allow us to do this, they being DEP, how far down the beach are we gonna go? We're gonna get that question, and it's a good question. Because anytime you're going into the end of the title, it's a whole easy term.
Well, along with what Mark said and what I said, once we have a plan, I would strongly suggest we communicate it to the neighborhood before we start construction. Instead of starting construction and waiting for things to explode. Just let them know, it's it's the 15th of October, and on October 27th, there's gonna be activity down here, we're putting down these temporary concrete ramps, blah, 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 and put it out front instead of offending people by just doing it. It's still gonna offend people who are doing it, but it's the right thing to do to talk to folks about. Yeah, suggestion.
All right. Any other communication?
No.
I got a communication actually on my way here, about, the well drill pensions on the island, you all may know. And they use the pond over here to fill up. They have a 1,500 gallon tank. They need to require fresh water to grow. It's a, you know, on by, across from Joe Rick's. So, and they use that pond, and I asked her, she's like, my grandfather, my father used that pond since 1972, as long as she can remember.
So was it, so corresponding complaining about that?
It was her that got a complaint or just somebody was complaining to her about her using that water. Either draining the water out, you know, it's a fire pond, having concerns about her just pumping the water out. And so she was pushing it out to me, asking about what our thoughts are as far as, is that a town-owned pond? Or is that a private pond?
We don't have any on tax maps, any property there that is, my understanding is it's all private property right there. It's that same thing with the pond that we use by, Charleston, off of Charleston Road, that's private property.
So who owns that pond?
Doesn't your mom own that? Of Vons, maybe the Vons?
That one, and then the one down on Charleston is, Helen Gooden.
Yeah, yeah.
And the skate pond is now the land trust.
Yeah.
Golf courses and golf courses.
I think my grandfather sold that to him so they could have, a road into his house.
That's
And I think it,
What was the question?
So the question to her was if whoever, you know, if she can't get permission from the town to get water there, or it seems to be that it's not, that the town doesn't own the pond, so we can't give her permission to take water out of the pond. So I have to send her back a message saying you gotta go talk to the private owner of the pond.
Was the complainant to Hanson, the person who complained to Hanson, was that the landowner or was it just a random person?
Don't know.
If it was the landowner, I'd be concerned if it's just some person complaining, I would just ignore
Well, she's looking for having permission to do it. So because so that way she can go, the next person complains her, she goes, I have permission to do it. I have written permission to do it.
it. So I think you should talk to bonds and see if they're able to offer permission for that from the bond that's on there.
So I'd push it back to the welder, but I don't think the town needs to be
Okay.
involved.
You're right.
But I just wanted to ask, it was a question that was asked me if we owned it.
Yeah.
I know we have, it's a fire pond, but that's the extent of it.
Maybe direct her to talk to the fire chief.
So,
How do they get permission to use those ponds? I don't know.
well, I think that the permission
Comes
for
from the landlord.
fire is different than what she's doing.
It's a private business, so.
Yeah.
I would just go back to her and say, go back to Hanson and say, could you please contact the landowner? And just say it's always been done, but I just want to make it formal.
Yeah. I don't recall the town, if I may, ever have an easement for any of these dry hydrants.
Yeah, me neither. I thought it was just a request. All right, so I'll let her know. All right, any other communications? All right, moving on to the items placed on future agenda. So I got the line of plant, proposal. Don't know if we'll have well, we can still put the coastal water shellfish response.
I think that'll be too, I think they're gonna have to meet as a board. I think we're gonna be.
Yeah, just as a future.
Oh, future
it's not
agenda,
next week, but, just as something that, forward.
Let's just, if we can, maybe suggest to them to try to be ready, so it's, if any recommendations for our budget process.
Yeah. Anything else?
So that, you guys had asked me to talk to the attorney. And I talked to her, yesterday and then I talked to her today. There'll be a lot of communications on the next, meeting, what I'm hoping we could do is, start the meeting at 5:30 and have an executive session from 5:30 to 6, and she will join us through Zoom. Have that discussion through executive session, because the discussion is really going to border personnel. That's not really appropriate to discuss in public. And so she will kind of cover enough information that I think will help gauge after the fact what the next steps would be in terms of the CEO Dougherty complaint that was brought up under communications last week.
So I did meet with Vika today, and she did get some information from the lawyer, but she wanted some clarification. I told her she just got information this morning. I said, just hold off till you get your questions answered and you need clarification, because we're gonna look for her for an answer and she won't know. So,
Are we talking about the Dowdy situation? Or are
Yes.
we talking about Jim?
The Dougherty situation is going to be what will be discussed in executive session.
Okay. So, two things. One, I was in the office today to talk to Jim about something totally different. But I overheard, in a small office, I overheard the conversation. I'm a little nervous that you were having that conversation with him sitting there.
I had a conversation with her prior about it.
But you were talking to the lawyer.
We were talking about multiple different things, yeah.
But the most important thing I was going to offer was that, I went back to the ordinance and, I think there's a distinction here between, that we need to make, distinction between what a party like the Dowdys might think about as their next step versus, some of the other issues we talked about in terms of, job performance, communication issues, things like that. specifically the Dowdy's next step. It turns out, it was pointed out to me by a couple of citizens, and I had actually read this before we had our last meeting, and it's in my mind, but 603.2.4 or something like that very specifically states what what a party's next step is if they disagree with the decision that's been made by the code officer. Very black and white, and that party's next step is to go to the board of appeals. So there, you know about that. It's 603 something, but it jumps right out. It's a paragraph that says, if you disagree with a decision by the code officer, your next step is to go to the.
All right,
Yeah, that is correct. And the next step after that would be court. So this meeting will consist of us five, you and the code officer and our attorney.
Sure. All right, so everybody's in agreement, start at 5:30, so that way you can ask her questions and, you know.
On the 8th,
Yes.
All right, any other future agendas?
Just a quick question. So our next meeting is October 19th, as you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then without offending anyone's schedule, are we gonna try to get back on the regular?
Yeah.
That is the regular.
Yeah,
This
so
is the regular.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
No, thank you very much for you guys. I meant to say thank you last week and I completely forgot. It was just, both my boys are having, you know, school. I felt I needed to at least make one appearance.
Always good.
We have a presentation from Port City, our architects.
Oh, yes.
19th.
Okay, so Port City. That's gonna be a nice one. So I did reach out to, as far as communication, I did reach out to Dan Morse about the agriculture, so he hasn't given me any dates yet, so he's still kind of file dates with his group, so. And then some kind of agenda, so. All right? Yes,
what's happening with, the book?
we're waiting to hear back from, Ted Ballard, the IIC group. The owners are gonna go talk to, I think they talked to the board and then they're going to the owners.
We're taking a proposal that was put on the table to the members of the IIC, and they actually asked us, or they said that they anticipate getting questions from their board members, from their members, about what's it gonna cost for IIC to maintain the road beyond the proposed new parking lot all the way to the house, especially given that the road from the old parking area to the boathouse was never maintained before, it was just there, but it needs maintenance now because of the water. And I think the basic position at the meeting was, that's on you financially, permit wise, all that kind of stuff, but I think they were kind of asking, would you guys object if we did that? And the answer is private land, if you can get it permitted. Yeah. So, they gave us a date. It was October 16 or 17 or something like that, that they anticipated meeting with their group, and they get back to us, so they will be getting back to us before the November 1 deadline, we had set on the show. Also, Diane Lukat from the Land Trust had sent out an email along with that. Hers just said, we will have other comments. Okay.
All right, Mark?
I'm sorry, this may be out of order. I just, while I'm thinking of it, there's no emergency here. I just noticed, and I have been noticing, that maybe Vika, you and the town crew should just keep an eye on the float down at Chandler's that the ramp lands on. It appears to me like the flotation tub closest to the wharf may be taking on water slowly. Did you notice that? So we may have to address that at some point. What happens, slow, they'll start leaking slowly, and they'll lose their ballast, they call it, and have to replace those tubs. I know we had some extra ones, so.
Are those us? Or those the state? The floats?
That, oh,
We have to
To my knowledge,
maintain
it's
that
us.
ramp, so.
Yeah. They probably got a 4-pole in it from Cecil Pole.
I think it's the oyster.
Yeah.
the other thing is the stone here, are two on the next. I can push that.
Don't bear the easy.
All right, anything else? Bob. Sorry, I tried for 7:30. Bob, you kept adding stuff.
Well, you gotta work on your adjournment.
I'll say. Somebody could get it, tell you.
This is shortest meeting, and then she said, start this job.
Oh,
This is the what? She said, start this job, this is the record for me.